Hi everyone, I'm Annalisa from C.A.C. Global Solutions. We're an aircraft management company. Welcome to our YouTube channel. We're happy you're here. And we are here for another episode of Storytime with Bret. For those of you who don't know what Storytime with Bret is, it's a series of episodes where Bret is going to share with us something that he experienced during his career in aviation as an aircraft maintenance engineer and maintenance manager, aircraft manager, and airworthiness inspector for different civil aviation authorities. So, you're on, and I'm gonna listen.
So today, I'd just like to talk about a situation I was in years ago. When I think about it, it shouldn't have happened, but it did. And like most things in aviation, it was a learning experience, right? So I picked up something along the way, like I do with most things. And this one particular instance, I was a team lead or a supervisor for a commercial air operator, and we operated 10 or 12 aircraft, small turboprops, Jetstream 31, Merlin Metros, a couple larger turboprops, and even a couple large Boeing aircraft, 757s. But the crew I was responsible for, we worked nights, which was a good thing. It was generally quieter. But typically, this whole story kind of evolves around a manpower shortage that there was in the industry at the time, particularly on the maintenance side. I'm sure also on the operations, but it was such that, if I went next door to another air operator to borrow a part, I'd be offered a job because they needed people everywhere. And so the situation we were in is every night, a bunch of the aircraft would come back at the end of the day's flying. We would typically have 7, 8, 9 airplanes in the hangar for my crew, all small turboprops. And my crew, because we were short-handed, so manpower is such a problem. There was myself, licensed engineer, as the lead. There were 2 licensed aircraft maintenance engineers. There were 2 apprentices straight out of school, and 2 apprentices that we'd had with us for some time, and they had some experience. So with that team of, 7 people in total, I had to make sure that the maintenance was accomplished on 7 or 8 aircraft every night. And the maintenance that was due would be, very various tasks. Some of it would be defects from the day. Some of it would be scheduled items. Well, this one particular night, at the beginning of the shift, I look at the work scope for the night, and I assign everybody tasks, and I take them around and make sure everybody has what they need to get started. And then you spend more time than anything almost just going from airplane to airplane, job to job, checking to make sure everything's happening as planned. And this one particular night, I had these 2 apprentices, one that had some experience and one that was not so experienced. We had jacked one of the aircraft up. It was on all 3 jacks, and they were there was an airworthiness directive scheduled to be accomplished. And the task was there was a seal inside the main gear strut that had to be replaced. And so what that entailed was removing the strut, the cylinder from the strut from the cylinder, and replacing the seal and reassembling it and such. So I gave them the publications, the maintenance manual section, showed them the tools, the parts, and everything, and then I went to the next airplane and checked on what the other teams were doing and stuff. And interesting thing about this whole concept is this is under the Canadian aviation regulations. Pretty much anybody can accomplish maintenance so long as they meet criteria published by the company as far as their maintenance control. But only a licensed engineer can release the work that's accomplished. But if the primary requirement is the person releasing the aircraft has to personally witness the work that's being accomplished, either accomplish it or witness it personally, or inspect it to the degree necessary. So this involves an aspect of subjectivity where you gain experience with different apprentices, for instance, and you know what their abilities are. And so you may not witness every activity, every aspect of a job that somebody does. You may leave them with certain aspects and come back, whereas with other apprentices, you might want to watch every task they do because they don't know, and they may not know that they don't know, and somebody has to watch to make sure that these items are taken care of. So, and typically a licensed engineer will determine what are the critical parts where I need to come and look at something before it gets put together where I can't see it any further beyond, right? So all of that goes into the equation. But, you know, as licensed engineers, and experienced engineers, or mechanics, you tend to think that even the simplest tasks, people know, but you can't take that for granted, right? So I make my rounds around the 7 or 8 different airplanes, and I make my way back to these guys, and they still don't have the strut apart. And it's been a while, and I'm asking, you know, what's going on. So I look at it, and there's a large circlip at the bottom of the strut, and they've got part of it pulled out. About a third of the circlip is pulled out of the strut, and it's all bent up, and now I know we've got issues, right? But I asked them, I said, you release the pressure, right? It's in the maintenance procedure. They've got the process, right, written process right in front of them. And they both look at each other, and I put a wrench on it, and it goes, they're trying to disassemble a main landing gear strut under pressure.
Ooh.
I mean, we're talking damage to the airplane. We're talking potential lethal injury. So all that to say that, you know, you can't take for granted what somebody knows, and you know, unless you know for certain that somebody's done something a number of times and you're comfortable with what it is they've done. I mean, that's an aspect where it's not a critical element. So a licensed engineer wouldn't think that you have to be there to make sure that they discharge the strut. But nonetheless, if you're working with people that you don't know their abilities, you don't know their knowledge level or skill level, you need to monitor closely. So that was one. Another night, same idea, you know, everybody's assigned projects and you're going around. I mean, I'm turning some wrenches myself, but also I'm watching what different people are doing. And there was a life limit on nose landing gear links. And they had, so this evening it was planned that they had to be replaced. So I assigned a couple of people this task, and they went to it. I went around, I was doing my thing, I came back, and there's a large nut and a bolt, through bolt, and a nut, and just a very thin shoulder on it. And they had rounded off the corners on this hexagonal nut. And so now there's no way of getting this out. And this is like a magnesium strut link that is very close proximity. There's a thin washer and then the nut. So you have to be very careful not to damage the link. I mean, they're removing them for replacement, so that's not an issue, but they only have to come off for non-destructive testing, and then they can be reused. So although they're not a throwaway item, and they're expensive items. So I explained to them what I want them to do. I wanted them to take a piece of aluminum and tape it to the link, one above and one below the nut. And I wanted them to take a flat file, and just file a flat spot on the top and the bottom so that we could get a wrench on it.
Oh, okay.
And when they got to that point, come let me know. So they come get me, and they say, okay, we got the flat spot on the top and the bottom. So I come back. They didn't put the aluminum plates on the links.
Ooh.
and they filed into the links.
Oh no.
The links are now completely garbage.
Oh.
We were able to remove them and put the new links and a new nut and everything. It just destroyed thousands of dollars of aircraft parts.
Oh wow.
So, no, it could be any number of things that you need to monitor somebody for, because again, unless you've worked with somebody and you have a clear understanding of what their abilities are and their grasp of how to interpret processes, you really need to watch people.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting situation. It has a lot of human factor in it, and it's also reflect the current situation of aviation, because apparently there is a shortage of mechanics.
Yeah.
In this last year, I saw a lot of posts, a lot of people talking about this. So, to me, there are a few aspects, right? So first of all, if you have the aircraft maintenance manual procedure in front of you, why are you not reading it? Particularly if you are new to the job. And I think that there is a lack of maybe knowledge, appropriate training, maybe awareness of the importance of following the procedure, and maybe a lack of awareness of, what you do is important under a safety point of view, but also under a financial point of view, because some of these parts are very expensive. But also there is the aspect that if you are short in manpower, you can stay just simply there babysitting them. So, where do you find the balance?
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, it is a balance, and in my mind, the one thing that you have to do is you have to make management aware of the potential issues that are there, because if we went from that company, we went from having, I think, 10 airplanes to 17 in a matter of 3 months.
Oh wow.
And they hired 2 more people. So management, if you don't convey that there are potential risks involved, and I mean, that was before the days of SMS. And so now SMS, you should have a change management program, and you should assess all of these things, right? One would think that situations like this would be history. I've seen organizations with change management programs, and they don't do the assessments, and they do similar things where they get a whole bunch of new airplanes and they hire 1 or 2 or 3 more people, and it's not appropriate. So, from a regulatory perspective, you have to kind of step in and force their hand a little bit. And it's interesting, because a lot of times you can't do that unless you have evidence of why what you're trying to do is not working. So and this is where you get into non-compliances, where you come in and you see something that's not right and was overlooked or should have been done. Well, that's evidence. That's an example of how the system, as they have it, isn't working. So now you can force their hands a little bit. But getting back to one of your other points, they have the appropriate manuals and everything available to them. I've also worked in quality assurance, where I've gone into a brake overhaul shop, and they knew I was coming. They knew that they were being audited. So they had the manual out on the bench, and they have this brake all assembled. The manual doesn't match the brake that they're working on. But it looked good. So
sure.
Yeah, I mean, but that's more deliberate. What I was talking about is, like you say, more of a human factors issue that everybody should be aware of, because also I've had issues where I've worked a 26-hour shift, and I've had issues where I've had a night crew do a double shift to do an engine change on another Boeing aircraft. And these are all things that you really have to look at. Okay, there are lots of things involved here, and what's important. And it's not that you can't do them, but you have to try to mitigate any kind of risks that might be involved. This is an age-old issue. In the maintenance side, very few regulators even address the aspect of duty days for maintenance.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not aware of too many organizations. Well, there are organizations that do will limit how many hours a day or how many days in a row a maintenance person can work, but they're not mandated to in most cases. So
okay,
it's a bit of an
issue. You know, this is an interesting. Now we are going to go out a little bit on a tangent, because obviously there are so many aspects to the stories that you tell us. Because there are, again, other environments like shipboard operation again, or operating a helicopter in the bush. Sometimes you're not 100%, but you have to do what you have to do because you don't have any other choices.
Well,
how do you mitigate that?
You do. There's always the choice of not doing it. And, you know, this is like a lot of things in life. Maybe the outcome of your not doing it won't be favorable, but nonetheless, if you know it's not right, if you know that you're incapacitated because you took a medication that might induce drowsiness, or these things happen. And we talk about them in human factors, and I mean, human factors training is mandated in most regulation, but it's the practicing it. You know, it's one thing to talk about it and to understand and to read it, but so many people think, well, that's something somebody else does. You know, I don't work long shifts, I don't take drugs, I don't do this, I don't do that. You have to pay attention to what you're doing.
For sure. So coming back to your story and to your case with the apprentices, so what do you think was the problem? So they were not trained enough, it was just a lack of experience, and how do you avoid these circumstances? Because again, lack of manpower, it's something that is very actual, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could assess it in a number of different ways. I mean, yes, was it appropriate to have apprentices that were straight out of school working with an apprentice with some experience? Probably not. But I only had 2 licensed people and 4 apprentices. So what are my options, you know? So, and how you pair them up. I mean, but these are all aspects. You know, another way to look at it is, was I experienced enough as a supervisor or a team lead to understand the dynamics and what really needed to be accomplished? Nobody ever told me. It's just something you learn on the job, you know.
Well, this is my point. You know, sometimes you don't have a choice, because sometimes, like in this case, you had those people, and maybe all tasks were complicated. I don't know, but you know, because you may think, okay, I'm going to put an apprentice on a simple task, but maybe that night there are no simple tasks.
Yeah.
There are all big tasks that needs to be done.
You look at it this way too. If you have 8 aircraft and 2 of them need engine runs and engine troubleshooting, you've got 2 licensed engineers. These are the only ones that you can have on those jobs, right? Or you have one on doing that all night, and you've got another licensed person and yourself with 4 apprentices. I know some regulations, C.A.C, I believe they have a ratio of apprentices to licensed people. I don't believe that Ep.8 or Transport Canada have anything like that. But it's just something internally as an organization. The culture has to embrace that these are things that have to be assessed and mitigated in one fashion or another. You know, I mean, if they have to hire out maintenance to a third party if they can, then maybe that's what has to happen. But management can't be responsible if they're not made aware that there are issues.
Yeah, you know, that's another good point, because whether it's something it's in the regulation or not, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have to have it. So for example, like in this case, you were talking about, okay, maybe we can, even if it is not mandatory, we can put shifts together in a way where we can have a good ratio of licensed aircraft as a licensed aircraft maintenance engineer and apprentices. So this is, it becomes more of a company policy. So that you can always have some sort of, you know, balance between the experienced and the less experienced.
Yeah, and there will always be some people that say that this is mandated by regulation because you should have an SMS system. It's fairly typical today, and your SMS system should capture all of this. So, for instance, say an accident were to happen, and in the investigation they found that the people that worked on the aircraft were not appropriately trained or appropriately qualified or certified. The questions will be asked, why not? And what did you have in place to mitigate that? And if the answer is, well, we didn't because we didn't have the time or money or whatever, there's still an expectation that it's mitigated, that those risks are mitigated in some manner. Now, if the SMS system didn't take that into account, then it failed and it wasn't appropriate. And now liability lies with the organization.
Yeah, this is very interesting because it recalls a little bit the episode about the importance of reporting defects, because those are micro defects of the organization, not physical defects of the aircraft, but of the organization. And nowadays, at the time of your experience, there was no SMS.
Right.
We're talking about a long time ago. But nowadays with SMS, you as a supervisor, I suppose you have to report these instances to the SMS people.
With SMS, it should be embraced by the entire organization, right down to the mechanics. If the mechanics feel that they are pressed for time, they don't have the appropriate resources, that's a hazard. There should be a hazard reporting system in place.
Yes. We all know that very often doesn't happen, and that an apprentice, if the apprentice is having a hard time following the aircraft maintenance manual procedure, it's unlikely that he's going to, SMS, sure, I'm going to report this.
Yeah, there's a saying, you don't know what you don't know, right? And in the instances of these apprentices, they hadn't experienced it before, so they didn't know that there could be danger involved in some of these things, or they could cause damage, right? So until somebody conveys that to them, they may not even think of it.
So you have to always check, like in your case, you have the aircraft maintenance manual process reference in front of you. Just always use it. Always use it, ask questions if you're not sure, and report your mistakes.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay, that was an interesting one. Another interesting one. We can go on and on and on, but we are going to wrap up this episode here. And if you guys like these contents, please consider to subscribe, like the video, and share it. Leave a comment if something like this happened to you or you're interested in this kind of topics. You can know more about us, what we do and our services on CACglobalsolutions.com. You can follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. We have a podcast. It's called Aviation Perspectives with C.A.C. We publish every month. We already had some interesting interviews with the Isle of Man Aircraft Registry. We talked about business aviation, ISBO, and IBAC with Scott McPherson, founder of trainingport.net. And we had another interesting interview about the aircraft certification process with Adam Bacos. So please go and check our podcast and let us know what your thoughts are. Leave a comment, and see you next time. Bye for now.